So what I'm going to do is kind of speak a little bit toward the readings that we did, and it's great that you all did all the readings because we can kind of jam through some of this. Yeah, so what we want to do is kind of pivot off of the readings to get into some of the core concepts of Marxism and their relevance for today, or that we propose their relevance for today would be. And kind of that'll be a thread that we'll try to follow through the next 5 times that we're together. But so we read the Communist Manifesto together. As Rachel was noting, it was published in 1848. Marx and Engels had joined this organization called the League of the Just, and they kind of hit them up to join to write their manifesto. And they kind of had this idea going around. They changed their name to the International, or to the Communist League, the League of Communists. And it was through that vehicle, kind of also because they actually had a printing press. So they're like, we'll print it. And Marx and Engels were like, right. And wrote the Manifesto of the Communist Party in a fairly brief amount of time. Interesting is that they were not part of a communist party. That's not the name of the organization. And at that time in history, there was no such thing as a communist party. It was the League of Communists. When Marx talks about the Communist Party and the Communist Manifesto, he's talking about the tendency of communists in all kind of different movements or organizations. So the book came out, or the pamphlet came out, it had like an okay distribution. And then, so the 1848 revolutions sweep across Europe, and the book is like, they're like, oh, this is what these guys are talking about. It becomes like a very relevant book. These revolutions that were happening, the revolutions are crushed, and the book kind of dwindles. And then it has a life, like 10 years later, and it starts to kind of take on this life. And obviously, so the way I put it is, it has a slow start, but it ends up being a book that probably we could walk out of this room and within 15 minutes find a copy. Right? And so that's actually really significant. It's published in many, many, many different languages, in hundreds and hundreds of thousands of editions, by political organizations, by whatever corporate Random House or whatever publishing firms. You can still get it anywhere you go. But I like this picture because I had these cool different colors. It was, so it had a global reach, continues to have a global reach. It's fairly accessible language-wise and kind of was meant for a mass audience. Why we thought it was interesting to start with it is that the kind of the core ideas embodied in it were related to and motivated revolutionary struggles for many decades on every continent of the earth since it was written, moving forward into the present. So it had this extreme impact. It's not necessarily to say that revolutionaries are reading it as like a guidebook, but it's a point of reference, and it's as we are sitting here studying it, people all over the world are as well. Another reason we thought it was important to talk about is, although Marx and Engels would criticize, self-criticize, and change some of the ideas that are in the book. So they talk about, they wrote it really fast, and this is before Marx is like doing his deep dive into like political economy and research about how capitalism works. So they actually changed some of their ideas. If you had a chance to read the preface or whatever, or any of their like 50 prefaces that come before most of them, like they'll talk about they got some things flat out wrong, right? And I think that's an interesting thing. It's an interesting political engagement that they had with their own work over time. An example is they talk about labor, later they'll say labor power. Right? But even with that, I feel like the manifesto embodies so much of the key elements of Marxist thinking, and it serves off as a good jumping off point for further study of Marx. But also all sorts of other topics. He talks about, like, it's a short, it's like 20, there's like only 5 paragraphs that are more than 5 sentences long, things like that. But he talks about history, culture, sorry, I'm he talks about history, culture, the state, the environment, political power, the economy. There's a lot there. There's a lot to pivot on. So what are Marx and Engels saying in the Manifesto? Kind of outright, they're saying that revolution of the oppressed is possible, it's desirable, it's in the air, it's a part of history, and that revolutionaries have no reason to not proclaim their intentions, right? Revolution is a part of history, right? So can I say right after you can say it, because it's true. They go on to say that, kind of another point is, capitalism hasn't always existed, right? It's a thing that has emerged, that has grown. It is social, it is brutal, it has strengths, it's kind of impressive in some ways, and it also has weaknesses. So this is a quote, oh sorry, these initial quotes are from the Manifesto. So he's just, in some ways, Marx is like giving capitalism and the drivers of capitalism their due. It's like, yeah, they innovated a whole lot of stuff really quick. They took power relatively quick. They built impressive infrastructure. One of the weaknesses that Marx points out, sorry, this is really long, and I'm talking at the same time, I'll just read it. But with the development of industry, the proletariat not only increases its numbers, it becomes concentrated in great masses. Its strength grows, and it feels its strength more. The various interests and conditions of life within the ranks of the proletariat are more and more equalized in proportion as machinery obliterates all distinction of labor and nearly everywhere reduces wages to the same low level. I'm going to skip because I'm going to run out of time to read all of this stuff. What he's saying is, so he talks on the previous slide that capitalism is super innovative, it does its due really fast, the bourgeoisie, this class in control of capitalism. They move fast, they move well, they move efficiently, and they're moving to bring more and more of the planet and more of the people into its sphere, and into the capitalist system, right, as workers. But what he's also saying is that, yeah, but it brings workers close, right? It's obviously causing untold misery, but more and more people who would maybe be in isolated parts of the world are being brought together, or their conditions are similar. So they have a lot more in common, right? They have a lot more ways to communicate. Their future, or their idea of overcoming what's keeping them down, is more and more in common as well. So it's that kind of contradiction, the same thing that capitalists do well also starts to create the conditions for its undoing. Or so Marx hopes. So, yeah, this is a little bit more succinct to say, right? Is that I think it's also important to point out in the Manifesto that the bourgeoisie is not like a bunch of guys sitting around a table like this, right? It's this class of people that emerged from historical conditions, that they took hold of power, right? That they built a capitalist infrastructure, a marketplace, a mode of production. They pulled working people from all over into that mode of production. They control the means of production. But the thing snowballs. It doesn't need a bunch of people to say, here's our next step, here's our next step. It has its own logic. And part of, he starts to point out, and it's interesting to think now, he starts to talk about, wait a minute, this thing is bent or is built on exponential growth and devastation of people and the environment. He talks even a little bit about the environment in this piece, and it's 150 years ago. He says, they can't do that forever. And he starts to talk about how they're kind of setting, in their expansion, they're setting the conditions for their own ends. And one of the primary enders, or the thing that will bring them to the end most decisively is the people that they're exploiting. So they turn people into workers, but those workers will bring about the end. He talks about how working people have always resisted their exploitation. And he has this part where he talks about how, that's always been the case. People always fall back. He starts to talk about communism as an idea that can bind together those kind of incoherent or kind of sporadic or random resistances. Is that the more of a consciousness that's developed among these workers, the more of a common consciousness, the more effective they can be in fighting back against exploitation. But also, in that fighting back, this idea of communism isn't just like, I'm a communist because I'm against the bourgeoisie that's exploiting me. It starts to become the seed, or it starts the roots, rather, to a revolution, right? To a whole different world. He talks about how this is a whole new stage of humanity would come from these workers overturning their conditions. So kind of thinking about the idea of communism as a sort of political coherence of the workers' movement, and a coherence that pushes the horizon, so they're not just fighting for some better conditions in the factory, they're fighting for a whole new understanding of even what it means to be human. It's important to I think about in the text that he goes to talk about how communist ideas are scary to the proletariat, and it's kind of like a funny part, I thought, because he kind of makes fun of all these stereotypes of communists, right? They're like, they're against religion, or they're against the family, or whatever. And he said, yeah, we are actually, and he says they should be right to be afraid. And so then he rolls it back a little bit. It's like, we're not against families. We're against actually the decimation of workers' families struggle by a capitalist system. We are against their idea of the family. We're against these things. And so, in it, I think is this beautiful thing around the ways that, and thinking about what Rachel pointed out, Communist Manifesto is like propaganda, so it's meant to fire people up, is that he's like, your ideas are dangerous, but your ideas are dangerous because they're going to change the world. And so, and I think he had this before, he had this after, but was very much stoking up a kind of relentless critique and confrontation to the dominant ideologies of the oppressor, in this case of the bourgeoisie. Just a few: private property, culture, religion, the family, etc. Points out specifically and spends some time. He talks about how communist ideas can and should motivate a workers' movement and their political programs and struggles, and that sometimes these struggles could and should be reform struggles. So he talks about that a little bit, right? About bettering the conditions under capitalism. He says that sometimes, even though they're talking about changing the entire world, he talks about the proletariat needs to take care of the bourgeoisie of its own nation sometimes, that struggle is going to be national in character. He talks about, so there's all those particularities, there's the here and now, but there's the reform, there's the struggle of German workers, right? It's like, that's all well and good, because that'll help give air and strength to the movement. But, I think he argues that, let me add one more thing. He also says that communists would work with other revolutionaries, and there's that whole kind of long part about it, like these aren't real communists, and these aren't real communists either. There's kind of that, where he maps out these different types of communism in less than generous terms, right? And it's like, kind of recoups later. It's like, no, but we'll struggle alongside them and with them and so on. But it's all toward this idea, and it's kind of this inevitable, or he literally says inevitable, not just victory of the working class over who would exploit them, but changing everything. And he gets into that everythingness of that changes in different works of his. But I think it's important as we move on to think about, coming from that text, these kind of ideas around contradictions between having an internationalist view or a view of a world that is yet to come, but having that have an effect on how you do your local work, how you do your work in here and now. There's three kind of core concepts that we think we want to build on in the course of this class, and in the next two sessions in particular, we're going to take them on directly. Those three concepts are materialism, political economy, sorry, I'll go in and change that, and class struggle. These are things that he talks about time and time again throughout his entire body of work. Later, other revolutionaries will bring them up, enliven them, struggle over them. There's a famous work by Vladimir Lenin who says, these are the three things, these are the three basics of communism. So I'm influenced by that sort of piece myself. So we're going to get more into them, but really quickly, what we mean by materialism is the idea that human knowledge, human experience doesn't come from nowhere, right? It doesn't, you're not born whole, it doesn't drop out of the sky. The reality is, your ideas of reality, your engagements of reality are shaped by your time, place, and conditions. How many times have we said that today already?
That would be like that.
Yeah, so our time, our place, our conditions, and in his view, in this piece in particular, what he would call the mode of production. What is it that you have to do to survive, right? What is your relationship to land and the work that you have to do on that land, or somebody else compels you to do on that land? That's going to affect your consciousness. That's going to affect the way that you see the world. And he's arguing the previous idea, particular idea of idealism, that things are kind of this way because a god said they were, right? Or the king said they were, or something like that. And he's saying, well, no, there's actually a science to how social formations come together, how knowledge is derived from our environment. And we'll get into more into that. The next thing is political economy, and that is capitalism. He's understanding that the capitalist system is not a relationship between things, but a relationship between people, right? That is a driving force in people's lives. It has a profound effect on everything. And he gets into some descriptions of capitalism that I talked about before. The third is class struggle, right? And he kind of says that right off the gate. History is actually class struggle. That's how it should see history. There's other pieces where he talks about, history doesn't pop out of the minds of, I think it's interesting that we still today will read a history book and it's from the perspective of like a president or whatever, right? And it's like, oh, this president made this decision, and then this happened, and then this other intellectual made this decision, and then this happened. And he's saying, no, he's bringing that materialism to bear. And he's saying, no, actually, history, things change because of struggle, right? Things change because different social forces emerge based on the conditions in which they emerge, and they come into conflict with one another. His argument is that in his time, some argue in our time still, that things have come to a head in which you have capitalists, the bourgeoisie, proletariat, right? And that they are pitted against each other in kind of this ultimate struggle. And he kind of puts it in epic terms in the Manifesto. But he puts it in these terms that have to be mind-blowing if you were like a worker in a factory and you could read it and say, guess what? The future is yours. The future is not theirs, the future is yours because of this method that you can apply to understanding your present and understanding your past and therefore understanding your future. And we'll get into all of those a little bit more. So why do this class? Why study Marxism? He wrote this 150 years ago, why study it? The other piece that we read was a short piece from Al Jazeera by Jayati Ghosh, and she was writing a piece about Marx's Capital, that's 150-year anniversary of that book. And she kind of lays it out. She says, well, capitalism still exists. And Marx gave this scathing, this very in-depth understanding of how capitalism works. He kind of decimated previous ideas about how capitalism works or the effect that it has on people. And he kind of did this beautiful thing where he said, as bad and as total, and he's talking about a thing that separates you from yourself in the most thorough and systematic way. And despite that, those who are being attacked or decimated and separated from themselves are actually going to be the people who bring in a whole new, beautiful, different world. And so kind of her thing out the gate in her piece is that, well, capitalism still exists, right? Marx should be relevant as long as capitalism still exists. And, she talks about a few different, even taking into account changes in the capitalist economy or capitalist technology or the rate or style of exploitation, his stuff is still relevant. His methodology in particular is still relevant. Once again, remembering that Marx, we would argue, is not meant to be read as stereo instructions. So it's not like, well, okay, Marx said capitalism works like this, and he said history works like this, and then so capitalism will do this, the proletariat will do this, and voila, right? No, this is where the materialism part comes out, the dialectics that he mentions, maybe not. That we'll learn about in a couple weeks. That things aren't so simple, and that's actually a good and useful thing. There, for a second. That's upside down. So, Marxism is relevant today because capitalism still exists. If we hate it and we want it to end, we do well to understand how it works. Secondly, if we look to the world, and we see, are concerned with, are part of organizations who are fighting around a whole bunch of different issues that Marx was also concerned with, who had insightful and useful things to say, those who came after him had insightful, useful things to say and do about it, and just some of those things that all of which are mentioned in just the Communist Manifesto that we read, but certainly, of course, throughout the body of his work: war, displacement, workers' rights, workers' conditions, exploitation of the environment and of people, and the interrelationship between the two, colonialism, disparity in wealth, the necessity to build strong organizations, so on and so forth. All these things that probably, if we were in a meeting of most any organization in the past week, one of these things might have come up. Those things were coming up for Marx, and he had a thing or two to say about all of them. And he had a challenge to his contemporaries, and therefore a challenge to those who came after, that there's a methodology that you could apply to understanding these things that seem like giant, irrefutable problems. Another reason why we think it's important, and Rachel referred to the politics of CPE earlier, I at a relatively recent point in time, so within the past 50 years, more than half of the world, more than half of the people in the world were living in a socialist system of some kind, or part of a struggle against capitalism and for a different world, for socialism. That were influenced by Marxist ethics. So more than that, just 50 years ago, more than half the world was living in a socialist system. That system was still situated within capitalism, so it's not so simple, right? But that's interesting to us. Even after the kind of declared victory against socialism with the fall of the Soviet Union in the early 90s, even after that, Marxist movements containing millions and millions of members and activists and allies still exist and are in struggle today. So there are Marxists fighting, doing work today, right? If we understand even slightly, if we can agree with even bits of the Communist Manifesto that are talking about it being a document of liberation for people who are denied a say in their lives, who are denied access to the things that would make their lives cooler and richer and whole, if we are invested in that still today, that's even if we say something like that's not fair. If that continues to not be fair, then perhaps some of those ideas are still relevant. If we're, and this is some pictures of whatever Marxist influence struggle from just this past year. Okay. So you have the Philippines up top, down there on your right is one of the communes in Venezuela, the Bolivarian communes, and then here in the southern part of the United States you have Cooperation Jackson, down in Jackson, Mississippi. I'm going to skip so you have some time. I would say the fifth point is that we would think that Marx offers oppressed people a methodology that's revolutionary, that was meant for oppressed people to use, to expand on, to learn from, to teach others, to struggle with, to change, to grow. And we think that its methodology is also applicable to itself. That it's a tool that can be used to retool the tool, right? And so to be less abstract is that Marx didn't figure out everything. He was not a religious thinker, so he was not talking about prophecies or anything like that. So he missed a whole bunch of stuff, right? Or a whole bunch of stuff happened after him that he did not think of. But we would argue that there's a lot to learn from ways in which his ideas have been extrapolated, and I think Fanon used the word once, stretched, and applied to different contexts and different situations, and have changed revolutionary thinking itself. And just a few examples of those, and hopefully those will resonate in the next sessions, but thinking about the contributions of revolutionary feminists, of third world Marxists, of theorists and practitioners of trans liberation, of indigenous liberation, that some of these things Marx never said one word about, some of them he said problematic words about, but that following him, people coming out of all these different traditions, different places, different identities, found his methodology useful, and I think that's useful to contend with and engage with.